What comes to your mind when you think of the Russian surface fleet? Is it a high-tech fleet with modern ships ready to take on the most formidable navies in the world? Or is it an aging, decrepit fleet that can't maintain itself like the Kuznetsov here? It's the Moskva, isn't it? I know you're sitting there on your couch thinking about the Moskva. But in the past, I would have said the Admiral Kuznetsov was the epitome of the Russian fleet. But I feel like that's wrong. Another admiral is Admiral Nakhimov. This battlecruiser, if you want to call it that, a ship that until recently has been in dry dock, receiving a refit for nearly 30 years. Yes, you heard me correctly, 30 years. Not exactly a speedy process. Not only that, it was a costly process too. The cost of this refit, more appropriately titled a reconstruction, was approximately $2 billion. Like an aging home someone wants to renovate, the ship is a money pit, unlike today's sponsor, and it seems like the ship's finally ready for service in the year of our Lord 2026. But it begs the question, how'd we get to this point? In today's video, we'll answer that question. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, today's video is sponsored by World of Warships. And honestly, if you're as obsessed with massive warships and ridiculous ship designs as I am, this is the game for you. I have a questionable amount of hours in it, and for good reason. World of Warships lets you take command of over 800 historically accurate vessels that includes destroyers, cruisers, battleships, aircraft carriers, and submarines. Unfortunately, that doesn't include the monstrous Kirov-class we're discussing today. The tactical combat is deep, the graphics are stunning, and unlike the Admiral Nakhimov, you don't have to wait 30 years in dry dock to experience the best of it all. It's completely free to play. So stop sitting on the couch and click the link in the description or in the pinned comment and use code IMPACTFORCE to receive all this cool stuff, and I'll see you on the high seas. So go check out the link in the description or in the pinned comment to get all this cool stuff. Again, remember to use the code IMPACTFORCE. Thanks to World of Warships for sponsoring the video. To start this video, we have to go back to the 1960s, in the heady days of Sputnik and Yuri Gagarin, when the world trembled at the sound of Soviet rockets. Although they didn't tremble at the sound of their silence, maybe repressing democratic movements behind the Iron Curtain. But the design and development of the Kirov-class guided missile cruisers, designated Project 1144 and Project 1144.2, began in the late 1960s, emerging from a strategic shift in Soviet naval doctrine. Following a period where missile cruiser construction had been disrupted to prioritize anti-submarine warfare ships, the Soviet Navy recognized the need for a new generation of powerful surface combatants. Initial studies in 1968 envisaged a nuclear-propelled vessel armed with 6 to 8 next-generation long-range anti-ship missiles. However, Admiral Sergei Gorshakov rejected this early iteration, considering its capabilities far too limited to challenge Western naval supremacy. The design team was sent back to the drawing board with instructions to drastically enhance the ship's offensive punch. Central to the vessel's evolution was the development and integration of its primary weapon system. Originally, the Basalt missile system was intended to replace the older P-35 missiles seen on the previous cruiser projects. However, persistent development delays with the Basalt systems forced designers to pivot, ultimately leading to the development of the more advanced Granite anti-ship missile system. Drawing from practical lessons learned with the earlier Project 58 cruisers, where manual reloading of P-35 missiles proved deeply problematic and limited the volume of fire, designers realized that overwhelming a sophisticated adversary required the ability to launch massive simultaneous salvos. This operational requirement led to a major structural innovation: the installation of angled canister launchers countersunk directly within the hull forward. This arrangement allowed the ship to carry a massive battery of 20 Granite missiles without creating excessive top weight or restricting the firing arcs of the self-defense weapons and extensive radar arrays. As the requirements for heavy anti-ship armaments, robust self-defense suites, and anti-submarine capabilities expanded, it became clear that the vessel would require a hull significantly larger than any previous cruiser design. To sustain high-speed operations and provide unlimited range for global deployment, a unique propulsion system was chosen, combining nuclear reactors with conventional steam propulsion for high-speed boosts. The ship's operational role shifted dramatically following the massive 1970 Soviet naval exercise Okin, I think. I'll put it up on screen now, and you in the comments can tell me below. But this exercise exposed the severe command and control vulnerabilities, demonstrating that managing a large naval force in an open ocean environment from shore-based facilities was highly impractical. Consequently, Project 1144 was modified to integrate extensive staff and fleet command facilities directly on board, essentially placing a shore-based headquarters at sea. Shocking, when the fleet is out at sea, they need to be able to adapt to the environment around them and not rely on information and commands from shore. The final staff requirement reflecting this command cruiser role was officially approved on May 25, 1971. The design continued to adapt to emerging threats throughout the decade. Naval exercises in 1975 highlighted the extreme vulnerability of large surface ships to coordinated air attacks, prompting a final major redesign to heavily augment the vessel's air defense umbrella. When the lead ship Kirov finally took shape, it featured a formidable and layered defense network. This included long-range missiles, medium-range missiles, and close-in weapon systems, alongside armor plating in vital zones. Later ships in the class, such as Fruins, continued the development, altering gun configurations and allocating space for newer air defense systems, cementing the Kirov-class as the ultimate expression of Soviet Cold War surface warfare capability. Whoa, folks, I need to be a YouTuber for once and ask you all to subscribe. Only a handful of you who watch these are actually subscribed, and it would help me out a bunch if you did. I know a lot of you think this call to action is corny and stupid, but it really does help. You know what also really helps? Go check out that link to World of Warships. It's in the description or in the pinned comment. It's literally free stuff. Just go click it and use the code IMPACTFORCE. Come on, Timmy, I know you want to. Okay, a bit more developmental talk than I wanted, but I needed you to get some background. Here are the particulars as found in Soviet Cold War guided missile cruisers by Edward Hampshire. Do note there were changes and alterations to individual ships, like Nakhimov, who got additional launchers and close-in weapon systems and radars. Briefly, I do want to discuss the term battlecruiser, often used to designate the ships. It's used to describe the ships and historical pieces, as well as official records. But the designation battlecruiser was more of a fluff piece to describe how powerful these missile cruisers were, and seriously, they are powerful ships. Certainly in today's day and age, no one would use such an outdated term like battleship or battlecruiser to describe a modern warship. Anywho, the ships, and specifically our Admiral Nakhimov, which by the way, her original namesake was Mikhail Kalinin, but that was changed in 1992 because, the whole death of the Soviet Union. The ship began construction in the Baltic shipyard in 1983, and with the enormous size of the ship, there was only a few yards capable of taking on work, the Baltic shipyard being one of the only ones. The failed battlecruisers and battleships of the past, such as the Sovietsky Soyuz class, were constructed in these slips, or at least attempted to. Certainly not a great omen for the battlecruisers, but construction of the cruiser carried on swiftly, being completed in 1988. Not bad, surely Russian shipyards could keep up that speed. Once commissioned, her active service in the late Cold War wasn't all that exciting, as she joined the Northern Fleet in April 1989, making a trip to the Mediterranean in 1991. The reason why the career or the active one of the ship is so boring is because the fall of the Soviet Union and the rise of the Russian Federation. The nation was broke, and to maintain such a costly ship, took a lot of money, and the Russian Navy had other priorities like Admiral Kuznetsov or Kursk. Okay, not great examples, but come on, Admiral Nakhimov is expensive to operate. The last time the ship went to sea under its own power was in 1997, or at least until recently. Admiral Nakhimov was towed from here to here on August 14, 1999, to undergo repairs. Got spooky really quick. This repair and refit was repeatedly delayed, forcing the ship to spend nearly 30 years in northern Russia, a fate I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Pretty much in every other video, I would touch on a refit, but considering this is a majority of her career, it's going to be the majority of the video. But we can skip over a few years, as between 1999 and 2006, Nakhimov just sat there, doing nothing, and I really mean doing nothing. Almost no work was done to the ship besides the bare minimum, something similar to the Admiral Kuznetsov right now, but the aircraft carrying cruiser still has it a lot worse. However, in 2006, something finally happened. The Russian government announced that she was to undergo a refit in the Sevsmash shipyard, where she had been since 1999. Rumors swirled during this time about how this refit was ahead of schedule and the ship would shortly return to service with the Northern Fleet. This, of course, wasn't true, and the ship remained inactive. In 2008, the ship's modernization work started, or at least the initial work, with these projects being rather ambitious yet rubbish, calling for the work to be complete by 2012. Yet again, there were more delays, as Sevmash Shipyard said there was simply not enough money and they needed more, as the man who asked for the money had a suspiciously 50 billion ruble-shaped belly. Okay, that last bit is conjecture, but I mean, come on. Obviously, money was an issue, but another pressing issue was the fact that no one knew what the heck the modernization was going to consist of. So without some sort of goal to work for, what was the point of continuing the work? So what exactly did they decide to do? The extensive and girthy modernization of the Admiral Nakhimov represents one of the most complex and convoluted projects in modern naval history, transforming a legacy 1980s Soviet hull into an exceptionally heavily armed surface combatant. After sitting inactive for over a decade due to post-Cold War funding shortages, a formal state contract was signed with the Sevmash shipyard to overhaul the vessel. Structural work began in January 2014, while other things happened that year, and by November 2015, workers had completely stripped the hull of its obsolete Cold War-era radar complexes, internal cabling, and analog electronic warfare systems to make way for a digital command hub. So essentially, they were gutting the ship to make room for modern technology. Maybe something like in Command & Conquer 3. Probably not, but at least we can hear Tim Curry say he will go to space.
I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
The primary objective of the multi-billion ruble refit is a radical upgrade in strike and defensive firepower. Okay, this is where things get a bit iffy, as the ship has its old anti-ship missiles and air defenses stripped, and replaced by new equipment claiming to have 176 vertical launch tubes between anti-air and anti-ship missiles, new close-in defense systems, new ASW, and combat information systems, even possibly having the 3M-22 Zircon hypersonic cruise missile. Just like Kim Kim in North Korea, or honestly anywhere in today's world, even here in the West, you can't exactly trust what people claim their ship's capabilities to be, as they could be overcompensating like Kim Kim, or maybe hiding capabilities. Like, we all know for a fact all the world powers have secret space fleets. No, just me? Okay. Deadline after deadline passed as the refit was revised because it was taking so long, you might as well add this or that bit of fancy new tech. But the United Shipbuilding Company, the people who were working on the ship, as well as the Admiral Kuznetsov, yikes, pushed the timeline back to 2021 or 2022. That pushback occurred in 2018. By 2020, the structural phase of the reconstruction had completed and the Admiral Nakhimov was finally relaunched back into the water, with sea trials supposedly starting in 2023. Of course, this was another ambitious yet rubbish goal. As 2023 came and went, there weren't any sea trials, but there were mooring trials for the newly installed fancy pants equipment. Of course, with this being the Admiral Nakhimov, a couple more deadlines had to be passed for the sea trials to actually begin. Eventually, by the end of 2024, reactor number 1 was activated, and shortly after in 2025, reactor number 2 was activated. Hopefully they won't end up like another Soviet-era reactor. In August, in the year of our Lord 2025, Admiral Nakhimov did a thing. It moved, shook off all the dust and refit jitters, and began her factory trials, which seemed to have gone well. Again, like these more modern videos, you have to take the info with a massive grain of salt. Enough to make anyone thirsty. But by June of this year, 2026, the ship has begun its final sea trials. It doesn't seem that bad, right? Other powers who claim to be the preeminent world naval power struggle to build anything in a timely manner, so who cares if it isn't the fastest refit in world history? Well, that's where you're wrong, kiddo. The modernization of the Admiral Nakhimov should be a cautionary tale of defense procurement, plagued by crippling delays and skyrocketing costs. Originally intended to re enter service with the Russian Navy in 2012, a bit silly, the project's timeline repeatedly slipped. Active structural overhaul at the Sevmash shipyard did not begin in earnest until 2014, and subsequent design changes mandated by the Ministry of Defense continually pushed milestones back. The cruiser only commenced factory propulsion trials in mid 2025 and is currently undergoing its final state sea trials as of June 2026, many years behind schedule. Financially, the project has been an immense drain. Surely there was no corruption in Russia, right? The initial estimated 50 billion ruble budget quickly doubled, with conservative estimates now putting the final cost at well over 100 billion rubles, and due to inflation, Western sanctions, and the sheer complexity of replacing every internal system in the ship. That cost is an estimate, and that's somewhere in the $2 billion mark. A whole lot of money. A serious strain on the Russian economy as well as the military. The last point I want to make is the fact that this modernization was particularly detrimental to the Russian shipbuilding industry and navy. For example, the thousands of skilled workers that were toiling away at the ancient Admiral Nakhimov could have been working on new submarines or frigates, maybe even the Admiral Kuznetsov. But that last one's probably a good thing they didn't touch it. Still, working on the ship that is over 40 years old instead of new ships seems a bit backwards to me. Probably not the most effective use of resources. At the same time, the Peter the Great, another Kirov-class ship, and one you've seen a lot in this video, is basically being forced into retirement and scrapped because the Admiral Nakhimov took way too long to be complete, forcing the Peter the Great to continue to operate when it needed repair and refit. The timing of the sea trials was quite the aura farming moment for the Battlecruiser. Let me know, Gen Alpha kids, if I'm using that right. As Russia's only aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov, permanently trapped in its never-ending cycle of shipyard fires, crane collapses, and dry dock disasters, the Russian Navy needs a new flagship. And why not use this newish ship of Theseus type thing? The Nakhimov is being explicitly positioned to step into that void and salvage the pride of a heavily battered surface fleet. As of June 26, Admiral Nakhimov is back to the Northern Fleet, ready to operate. But as the multi-billion-dollar ship completes its final sea trials, the ultimate question hanging over a decades-long saga remains. Did Russia actually do something ambitious and not rubbish? Or did they spend almost 3 decades building the world's most expensive target? Let me know down below. Thank you all for watching, and please remember to like and subscribe as it will help the channel to grow. Until next time, my friends, have a great week. Again, special thanks to World of Warships for sponsoring the video. Don't forget to click on that pinned comment or in the description and use code IMPACTFORCE to get all that cool free stuff. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.